is Jay Horowitz with another edition of Amazing Mets Alumni Podcast. My special guest today is Ed Kranepool. Ed, first of all, how are you feeling? 3 years removed from May from your kidney transplant, everything kosher with you?
Everything is great. Fortunately for me, I feel so good. I want to make a comeback when you come to the ballpark.
Well, and you're going to be one of the guys played in the Old Timers Day game in August 27th, and a couple of swings left or whatever.
Well, I'm ready to swing, but I don't know who's going to run for me. We'll find out.
Yeah, it should be a great day. We have, from the 62 team, Eddie, we got Frank Thomas, Jay Hook, Craig Anderson, Ken McKenzie, and then the 69 team, Cleon is coming, and Ron. So it should be good to see the old guys again.
It's always good. I'll tell you what, and I always like to see my roommate, Frank Thomas, who I started with. He was 34, 35 at that time, and I was only 17.
He told me, Eddie, he's 92 now. He said he hit a home run to Polo Grounds, hit a home run at Chase Stadium. He wants to hit a home run at Citi Field.
Well, Frank's in great shape. He keeps himself in good shape. He'll be ready to play, and I'll tell you what, he'll challenge anybody and catch their best pitch.
He still has the record. He's got he's got a home run 6 straight games. I mean, before Alonso and Kingman, he was the guy, right?
He was a good home run hitter with Pittsburgh, and he came to the Mets. He was the first big name that could hit some home runs. I think he hit 34 the first year, and he was my roommate, and he took good care of me.
And do you think you're the last of a dying breed? When I meant you spent 62 to 79 with the Mets with one club. Molina's with the Cardinals, a couple of bits. That's passé now, right? Nobody stays that long with one team.
Not really, especially with free agency. I mean, the players are controlling the market right now. They can move around, and most of them don't have any loyalty to a ball club because they have an agent involved, and they seek out the biggest contract. And sometimes it works out well, sometimes it doesn't. I loved New York, and I wanted to stay here.
You had a choice? Did you have a choice with the White Sox? We signed them at Monroe High School. Was there another team involved?
When I first signed, I could have signed with the White Sox. I worked out for a lot of ball clubs. I could have been with the Yankees. I was a Yankee fan growing up. But, the Mets were my first choice. It gave me an opportunity in the major leagues in a hurry. I didn't think it was going to be that fast 2 days after graduation, but it was a long existence. We finally won the World Series after 7 years, which was great. And I'll tell you what, you became a name in New York, and it's been a great thing for me.
So it's been what, 50? It's been 69, 31, 53 years since 69, and you can still probably walk to any restaurant in New York, get a free meal.
No question about it. You can walk down the city of New York, and somebody's going to wave to you and yell to you. I've had bus drivers, garbage men stop on the streets of New York. It's been amazing that the existence of the 69 history is just continues to last, and people still want to talk about it this day.
Yeah, coming up to one kind of sad day, April 2nd, 1972, Gil Hodges dies of a heart attack. And, you and Ron and Claire and I were going to go up to Cooperstown. What made him such a great manager? Why was he so revered?
Well, everybody liked Gil and respected him because he was a great manager. He was a great player in New York. And he treated everybody the same. He was very strict disciplinarian, and he only had one set of rules for 25 players, and that's different. A lot of guys have different rules for different players, but he didn't care who you were. You had to play the game professionally. You had to know the right way to play, and you didn't cost your ball club, mistakes, mental. Physical, he never chastised a player, but if you made a mistake and threw to the wrong base, he let you know it.
Since I switched jobs to be more involved with the alumni and look at the research, what I realized about Gil, he used everybody on the entire roster, guys like Bobby File and Al Weiss, Rod Gaspar. They all had a role. It wasn't just the big guys, right?
You're correct. 69 was a team, and if you looked at it, everybody contributed, and that's why we beat the Chicago Cubs. They had the best 8-man lineup in the National League, but they got tired in August. The Mets never got tired. We utilized every player on the ball club. That's what made Gil such a great manager. He convinced 25 players that platooning was in the best interest of the ball club and yourself. And we all knew our role. We performed in that role, and we looked good. In going forward, we made Gil look good because everybody contributed. And if you went around the infield and the outfield, most guys were platoon players. We only had 3 or 4 guys that played regular. The other 5, we switched players all the time, but putting 2 players together, they were all stars in that position.
And no offense to what happened after Gil, I mean, but the guys I spoke to said if Gil had lived, we would have won more than one World Championship.
There's no question about it. We should have won in '73. Right. Unfortunately, you make mistakes during the season, you can pass them over.
Right.
In a short season, at the end, when the playoffs come, a mistake here or there, mentally, physically, or whatever, by either the manager or the players, cost you the World Series, and it cost us '73. The 6th game was the most important game the Mets have ever played. But we didn't have to win that game. Oakland had to win it. We wound up utilizing Seaver, short-rested, late in the year, which was a total mistake because, it's a long season. It's not a race, it's a marathon. And Tom was the kind of pitcher that needed his full 4 days off.
And you were having a good time and a bad time, but how did you put up with, 5 of the first 7 years, 100 games and losses? It had to be tough in August going to the ballpark those days, right?
August, that would be late. We never got to the ballpark. At the All-Star break, we'd be eliminated, really. And it was terrible. It's very tough to play that way on a bad ball club. So much easier to play on a good ball club with good players surrounding you and having a good team and having a reason to go to the ballpark. And '69 was so much fun. '73 was great because we were typical, but we all got healthy. There were a lot of injuries in '73, but we platooned, we made it through, and we played great baseball coming down the stretch. It's the one thing that you want to play when you're playing in the Major Leagues for is the World Series.
Tell me about that. You got to talk about Brewers. You got to believe. Heard a couple of different stories. One, some people thought he was mocking them, Donald Grant, and I think were you the one? You made him kind of apologize for that.
I did, because I was the one that was the player rep of the ball club, and I knew Mr. Grant for a long time, starting in '62, and he was a real businessman, very professional in what he did, and he gave us an incentive street talking in the ballpark, and Tug started screaming. He was very vocal, Tug, and had a lot of fun playing the game of baseball. But I saw Donald Grant as he was making a speech to the ball club. His expression on his face changed, and he cut his speech short after Doug started ranting and raving, trying to get the players motivated, and started saying, "You got to believe, you got to believe." And Grant walks out of the room. Well, I walked over to my roommate, who was Tug McGraw, and I said, "Roommate, you better go say something to Donald Grant. I know what you were trying to do, and I think the players do, but I don't think Donald recognizes the fact that you were trying to motivate us along with him."
Tug apologized.
And I said, "Tug, go outside." And I walked him out to the extra room that we had, and I introduced him, because Donald Grant didn't know every player on the ball club. He was the president and ran the ball club. And Tug went up to him and started to talk to him, and they shook hands, and then he came back into the room, both of them together, and they had a smile on their face. But I think going out, I think Tug was going to another ball club at that time of the year.
Yeah. So, Eddie, the first part, we have a lot of great historical events involving the '69 team. On April 15th, unveiled the Tom Seaver statue. What did it mean to the Mets? Did you know when Tom came on the scene in '67 what was going to transpire? I mean, was it early to tell what he was going to be like?
Well, we knew we had something special because he was very professional in the way he approached pitching. On the day he pitched, he stayed to himself. He looked over the rosters of the other ball club, and he was really pitching the ball game by himself and mentally getting himself prepared. But when he first started, he went to the minor leagues, and he won a couple of games. But his first year, I think he won 16 games in New York. But every game, we were in the ball game. He held himself. He never got knocked out. He never lost his composure on the field. We knew we had something special. That was the best draft the Mets ever made, and they were very fortunate to pick him. From a couple of ball clubs, it was a special draft, and we selected him, and we knew we had a star.
And is it one game in '60s? Is it one game that you remember? Was it the Black Cat game? The game when Koosman, I think, threw at Ron Sano after A.G. got hit. Was there one game that stands out in your memory before the playoffs started?
Well, I think the second game in the Chicago series, in the middle of the season when we beat them the first game, We beat Fergie Jenkins, and then he pitched a near-perfect game. He was dominating that ball game, and when Seaver had it early on, and was striking out people, you know you're in for something special because his control was so good. You know, he commanded the game, and he did it many, many times. You go on the field and you see Seaver, this is going to be something special. We saw the San Diego game, I think it was. He struck out 19.
Did you play that?
I played in that ball game. He struck out the last, I think, 9 or 10. And somebody just recently,
they did
they said tied it, but they didn't tie Tom Seaver, and I'm going to tell you why. The press doesn't write the story like it should be. Seaver struck out those guys in the last 3 innings of the ball game, not the first 3 when you're at the strongest.
Right.
So when you're facing a guy the 4th time around and you can strike him out and command the game in the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th game, that means something. Just check the records today. Pitchers don't go 5 innings, and they think it's a great ball game. Seaver would be mad at himself if he didn't go into the 9th inning.
Tell me about when Nolan Ryan, he was with you guys. Gil used him like as a spot starter and out of the bullpen. Could you envision what was going to take? 7 no-hitters, I think, after that. I mean,
well, the thing that you had to worry about with Nolan is what kind of control he was taking onto the mound. He could be great, or he could really struggle, and it was tough to play behind Nolan. Seaver was a pleasure to play behind him. The game was fast. He got the ball, he threw it, he got people out. Nolan was 3-2 on every hitter, walked a few guys, struck a couple of guys out. But when he was on, he was unhittable. And the only time I saw him, was really in batting practice. And I didn't want to face him in batting practice because now his ball is all over the place.
Was it a playoff game or World Series? We pitched last 6 innings, or
I think it was the World Series.
Bases loaded or something like that.
That was the World Series. He came in and just, when he was on, there was no question about it. He could dominate the sport. But remember, the Mets had 3 good pitchers on our pitching staff. Jerry Koosman was right behind Tom Seaver. Seaver was great. Jerry Koosman was great. And Gary Gentry was another guy.
Rookie at the time, right?
Rookie, great potential, had a great arm. He hurt himself. He had bone chips. Otherwise, he was going to be just like Jerry Koosman, an outstanding pitcher. Nolan Ryan was always the odd man out. Whenever early in the season it was a rain out, Seaver had a pitch on his regular rotation. Then you got Koosman. You can't tell him to sit. You can't tell Gentry. They're all winning. They're all competitors. Who got sat down was Nolan Ryan. He had no control.
We're going to say this is the 60th year of Mets baseball. We're going to celebrate Santana's no-hitter 10-year anniversary. It's hard to believe in 60 years of all the guys, Good and Seaver, Koosman. It's 1 no-hitter. Isn't that kind of crazy?
Well, because you got to have luck. I mean, there was one controversial play with Santana, and it went his way.
Right.
That was fine. Look at Tom Seaver.
With Jimmy Qualls.
With Jimmy Qualls. There was a guy that was a mediocre player, filled in, put him out in center field, hit the ball good the first time up, the second time, then he got a blue pit. And sometimes it's a couple of inches, sometimes it's a foot. Either way, and of course he'd have a perfect game there.
Eddie, tell me about Casey Stengel in the beginning. What was your memory of your first interaction with him, and how was that like?
I enjoyed Casey. He was a laughable guy, lovable guy, but he liked the young players. He took an affection to every young player. With the Yankees, if you remember, they always had young players coming up.
Right.
They did well with Casey. With the Mets, we didn't have the prospects coming up. We had myself, was really the first minor league guy that came up. Young kid, I was 17, and he made me sit alongside of him. He'd always be talking baseball. He'd be the first guy to the ballpark, the last guy to leave. And he wanted you to get better, so he tried to make me better by working with me. He had Gil Hodges tutor me at first base, and by getting me in the ball games in '62 when I was 17, he didn't throw me out there to the wolves. He let me play the 8th and 9th inning of certain ball games for defense, took Gil out and put me in, and then when it was time to play, he told me 2 days ahead of time, I'm going to play you a game on Saturday against the Chicago Cubs. Be ready, and that's the way he was. He wanted the young players to look good.
Did you think, I know Gil was always a player just for a year or two, did you think he would become a manager back then?
Well, you don't know, because I was so young. It was tough for me to fraternize with all the guys. I mean, I didn't go out with them, I couldn't socialize with them, so I was a lone wolf. But Gil was a great baseball player, and he was a great man. He became a good manager, but he was a human being. And we knew he had all the attributes to be a great manager. And once he took over, he was in control. Front office didn't come into his office and tell him who to play. He made that lineup up by the time he got to the ballpark, and he convinced players to do certain things, even though we weren't all in favor of it in the beginning. When you win, everything changes.
And you're looking forward to going up to Cooperstown in July?
I'm looking forward because he's finally getting the
Yeah.
tribute that he deserved. He was a good player, and when you check the records, he should have been in based on that record early on.
Right.
Then later on, the Veterans Committee puts him in. He deserves it, and he would have been a class manager.
He was on. He was 35 straight ballots before he got in.
That's a long time, and
Yeah.
he has more votes than anybody, I
Yeah,
guess.
I'm happy for Joan. His wife is still alive, 95 years old, and his kids are going to be there on the Saturday. They're going to throw out the first pitch. So it's kind of what I hear was a good man. He's a Marine and a good.
Everything about him was a class act, even though you had arguments with him. But he brought you into his office, and he learned from what he was talking about. When you made a mistake, he had you talk about it. He didn't talk about it. He said, "What'd you do wrong on the field?" And when you think about it, you knew why you were in the clubhouse with him. You admitted your mistake. You became a better player, and you know what? He dropped it in his office. That's the one thing I respected about him. He didn't go talking to the press about what you did wrong in the ball game. He protected his players.
But that year in the playoffs, all the lefty guys beat the Braves. You hit 3 Braves, and you didn't play that much in the World Series, right?
Well, we didn't play in the World Series. Only played one game, all the
Yeah.
lefties. We dominated the playoffs. We'd have lost the playoffs if the lefties don't come through, because the pitching was terrible. But they changed in the World Series. They pitched great. The right-handers played. They struggled. We played one ball game against Jim Palmer. We knocked him out and scored 5 runs. So the offense came back.
You couldn't be too happy about that, right?
Nobody was. None of the left-handers. I think Art Shamsky led the team in hitting in the playoffs. Hit over 500, and then he doesn't play in the World Series. But, of course, that was Gil Hodges convincing us. We got to the World Series platooning. We're going to finish. Look at Don Clendenin. He hits 3 home runs in the World Series. Okay, then they take him out against Jim Palmer. Now, he was on his way to be the MVP. I play against Jim Palmer. We hit a home run. So now the first base has 4 home runs.
That's great.
So every position was productive. Third base, you had Charles and Wayne Garrett. Second base, we had guys that filled in. Al Weiss, who didn't play much the whole season, hits a couple home runs in the World Series.
Well, Judy, I'm glad, it was 50-plus years, and we're still honoring the 69 Mets with Seaver and Gil Hodges early on. We have the old-timers game. You're probably going to take a swing in August, you think?
Well, I'd like to take a swing. You always feel you can hit. You have hand-eye coordination.
Well,
That'd
we'll
be
get
good.
Dwight. How about have Dwight couldn't pitch to you?
Oh, well, I don't think so.
right.
I'm smarter than that.
Well, you're a good man. Thanks for spending some time.
Jay, it's always a pleasure seeing you.
Thanks,
Thanks
Ed.
for being
Appreciate
our
it.
alumni spokesman.
Thank you, Ed. Appreciate you, man.